Jackson Jax Harris wheeled his battered amp onto the cracked pavement of 42nd Street just before noon, the city's roar swelling around him like an eager audience. He unclipped his guitar case, its once vibrant murals now scuffed by subway rides, and set it open at his feet, its interior lined with loose change and a scattering of crumpled dollar bills. With a practiced flick, he strapped the electric acoustic guitar across his shoulder, its mahogany body gleaming beneath layers of graffiti stickers. He plugged into the amp, and for a heartbeat, the world paused. Jax closed his eyes and struck a single, resonant chord that rippled down the block. It was the sound he had chased since his first open mic in Brooklyn. Raw, bluesy, defiant. Then he launched into his original composition, an unorthodox fusion of Delta-style fingerpicking and hard-hitting hip-hop rhythm. His fingers danced across the fretboard, and his voice, gravel-toned and urgent, spilled verses about struggle, hope, and streets that never sleep. But the crowd that gathered was not enchanted. Office workers stepped around him, their suits pressed and their eyes fixed on glowing screens. A trio of tourists halted briefly, smartphones out, then shrugged and sauntered onto a tacky souvenir kiosk. A young man in designer sneakers tapped his foot. But when Jax launched into the chorus, "They laughed, but I'm the echo they can't ignore," the man's foot stomped in annoyance, and he tossed a mocking thumbs down before striding away. A cluster of well-dressed executives spilled out of a luxuriously tinted SUV, laughing at the corner. They watched Jax's amplifier wobble against its stand with each beat, then exchanged smirks as one of them mimed plugging an invisible cord into his temple, muttering, "Too loud." Their laughter drifted back to him, sharp as broken glass. Jax faltered mid-riff, the amp crackling in protest. He straightened, tightened his grip on the neck of his guitar, and forced his voice upward, hoping to reclaim the moment. Across the street, two subway musicians, accordion and violin, watched from the station entrance. When Jax's bridge began to unravel in an experimental syncopation, they hooted in derision, the accordionist raising an eyebrow and the violinist shrugging theatrically before turning away. Even the street vendors, the usual champions of corner performers, shook their heads, muttering about noise complaints and lost foot traffic. Jax swallowed the sudden lump in his throat and finished the song on a defiant tremolo. He set his guitar aside, paused for a breath, and glanced at the handful of indifferent spectators. Gathering his courage, he bowed stiffly, eyes meeting those of a solitary passerby who had dropped a single coin into the open case. That small, nearly silent jingle was the only encouragement he heard. As he packed away his gear, a gust of wind snatched the last verse from the open case and scattered his lyric pages across the sidewalk. He lunged forward to catch them, but they fluttered into a storm drain, lost forever. Standing alone on the dirty curb, guitar in hand, Jax made a promise under the indifferent skyscrapers. If this city laughed at him today, it would listen tomorrow. That night, well after the city's streetlights had flickered on, Jax descended creaking wooden stairs into his makeshift Brooklyn basement studio, a cramped, windowless room where exposed pipes dripped in rhythm with his heartbeat. Against one wall stood a battered Fender Stratocaster, its pickguard scarred by hundreds of frantic strums. Along another wall, shelves sagged under the weight of dog-eared lyric notebooks, empty coffee cups, and a lone microphone mounted on a chipped stand. He flipped on a single overhead bulb, its yellow glow revealing his worn couch and a coffee-stained rug that had once been the site of impromptu jam sessions. A second-hand audio interface perched on an old desk, its LEDs blinking with promise. Jax slung his guitar over his shoulder and plugged into the interface, fingers grazing the strings until they hummed with resonance. He cued his DAW, an open-source program patched together to save money, and loaded the rough demo track he'd recorded earlier, a steady four-on-the-floor beat with muted kick drums and a syncopated clap pattern on the offbeats. He hit record and launched into the riff that had fallen flat on the sidewalk. A gritty, blues-infused progression in E minor that pulsed with tension. As he played, he tweaked the amp simulator's drive knob, coaxing out a warmer overdrive that made every note vibrate with raw emotion. Then he leaned into the mic and spat the first verse. They said I'd fade away in the noise, just another echo, born to be ignored. But I built my voice from silence and poise. Now watch me cut a path through your discord." He paused and enriched the track with a layered harmonica line drawn from a vintage loop he'd sampled during a bus ride on the A train, and watched his waveform climb across the timeline. The harmonica's wailing melody intertwined with his guitar, forging an atmosphere both mournful and defiant. Next, he imported a drum machine pattern, a crisp 808 kick thumping on every beat, a snare cracking on the 2 and 4, and a rolling hi-hat sequence that danced between 16th notes. Jax adjusted the swing parameter to give the rhythm a human groove, then panned the clap layer slightly to the right to open up the stereo field. He nodded as he listened. This was the sound he'd moonlighted for, the music that demanded attention. At 2 a.m., after 3 hours of layering bass lines, vocal harmonies, and a bed of ambient synth pads to fill the basement's empty corners, Jax leaned back and surveyed his creation. The chorus, his defiantly penned hook, now rang clearer than ever. "They laughed at my crescendo. But the echoes where I stand from street corners to crescendo, I'll lead this echoes band." He muted the backing track, leaving only his guitar and voice, ringing in the stagnant air. He hit record again, tracking a fresh lead solo. Fingers flying in pentatonic runs, bending strings to wail with longing and resolve. Each note carved space in the tiny room, pushing back against the suffocating walls. When the solo ended in a final, sustained bend, Jax stared at his DAW's meters and exhaled a long, steady breath. He saved the session as Echoes Jot Unbound V3, exported a high bitrate MP4 of the audio-video composite he'd filmed on his phone against the graffiti-tagged brick wall in his backyard, and typed a concise title, Jax Harris, Echoes Unbound, Basement, Studio Live. With tired fingers, he uploaded the video at 3:17 a.m. and watched as the progress bar climbed. There was no guaranteed reward, but as the timer ticked, Jax felt a familiar spark ignite in his chest. Hope, this time amplified by every creative choice he had made in the hush of the night. "Let them laugh," he whispered. "I'll see them roar." By sunrise, Jax's phone was vibrating so furiously that he nearly dropped it onto his basement's threadbare rug. He stumbled downstairs in his pajamas, bleary-eyed, to find his inbox flooded with YouTube comments, direct messages, and social media notifications. The video, titled Jax Harris, Echoes Unbound, Basement Studio Live, had racked up over 100,000 views in 12 hours. An unheard-of figure for a creator without a label or publicist. On Twitter, the hashtag #DudgeShuckEchoesUnbound was trending. Producers and fans alike tweeted sound bites of his gritty guitar riff and defiant hook. "They laughed, but I'm the echo they can't ignore." A viral tweet from a music industry insider read, "Raw talent alert, Jax Harris just broke the internet with this one live take. Watch now." It garnered over 20,000 retweets and sparked lively debates in threads comparing his style to early Freddie King meets Kendrick Lamar. Meanwhile, on TikTok, users had already created more than 2,000 short-form remixes within hours of the upload. One clip, set to a slowed-down, lo-fi drum loop, showcased a barista in Seattle, lip-syncing the chorus while steaming milk. Another featured a skateboarder in Barcelona, performing tricks in time with Jax's syncopated verses. Each video tagged Jax's account, pushing the original to the top of recommendation feeds worldwide. The Basement recording's raw authenticity lent itself perfectly to the platform's culture of remix and reuse. On Reddit's r/music and r/guitar, threads exploded with enthusiasts dissecting his technique. One commenter posted a frame-by-frame analysis of his tremolo picking, noting how Jax's thumb anchored the bass strings while his fingers danced across the higher frets. Another user shared transcribed tabs and drum machine settings, inviting fellow hobbyists to recreate the track. Within 24 hours, dozens of user-generated covers appeared on SoundCloud and Bandcamp. Everything from solo piano interpretations to full 5-piece band renditions. Jax's email inbox glowed with opportunity. A late-night talk show producer reached out, inviting him to perform the song live on The Midnight Jam in 2 weeks. An indie record label offered a development deal contingent on preserving his DIY aesthetic. A popular blog, Street Sounds, featured an in-depth profile: how one basement session turned a corner performer into a global sensation. By the end of day 2, Jax's subscriber count had leaped from under 500 to nearly 50,000. The video's view count topped 1 million. Comments poured in from every continent. Doctors in Mumbai praising the therapeutic catharsis of his lyrics, university students in Sao Paulo reinterpreting his hook as a protest anthem, and hobbyist guitarists in Tokyo requesting tabs. Jax watched it all from his cramped living room, heart hammering, as the realization crystallized. He had not just gone viral, he had ignited a movement that would carry him all the way to Madison Square Garden. Within days of his overnight fame, Jax Harris's inbox was awash with invitations, each more dazzling than the last. The first arrived from The Midnight Jam, a late-night television show celebrated for spotlighting raw musical talent. The email, sent at 3:17 a.m., offered him a live performance slot in 2 weeks, complete with a full studio band and a primetime audience. Barely an hour later, an indie record label called Stone & Sound reached out via DM on Instagram. Its A&R director praised Jax's authentic fusion of blues and hip-hop, offering a development deal that included professional studio time, a marketing budget, and potential support for a full album. The label's glossy PDF prospectus outlined an aggressive release schedule: a single in 6 weeks, an EP in 3 months, and a headline tour in the fall. Within 48 hours, festival organizers from the Emerging Artist stage at the Summerwave Music Festival in Atlantic City extended an offer: headline their 8 p.m. slot, supported by a veteran backing band with travel and accommodation covered. The festival's brochure boasted past breakout acts who had gone on to mainstream stardom. Yet, as the opportunities cascaded in, Jax felt a knot of hesitation tighten in his chest. His email from The Midnight Jam required him to sign an exclusivity clause, surrendering his YouTube performance rights to the show for 6 months. Stone & Sound's contract demanded creative oversight, granting their team final approval on every mix and lyric, a prospect that struck him as antithetical to the raw honesty that had resonated with millions. The festival's rider included a stipulation that all promotional imagery be retouched by their in-house design team, effectively sanitizing his gritty street aesthetic. That evening, Jax convened his closest collaborators in his loft: a former Subway beatboxer named Rico, whose crisp rhythms had first inspired Jax to add hip-hop beats, and Marlene, a seasoned jazz saxophonist who had mentored him through countless open mic nights. They gathered around a low coffee table strewn with printed contracts, each marked in red ink with clauses that stung. Rico tapped his fingers on the table, mirroring a snare pattern. "They want to polish you up," he said, voice low. "But what drew people to you was the rough edges, the basement fire. You lose that, you lose us." Marlene leaned forward, adjusting her horn-rimmed glasses. "Remember why you make music, Jax. It's not for the stage lights, it's for the story. If they uniform your sound, it won't be yours anymore." Jax traced the folded edge of the festival's VIP pass, its holographic logo gleaming. "But these are the breaks we dream of. Madison Square Garden doesn't call street performers, they call stars." He closed his eyes, imagining the roar of a sold-out crowd, the bright house lights, and the echo of his chorus filling the rafters. Marlene laid a hand on his. "You can headline the garden on your own terms," she said softly. "Let's build the sound that brought you here, just bigger. If they truly believe in you, they'll sign on to your vision, not the other way around." Rico grinned, snapping his fingers. "Let's invite them to our rehearsal. Show them the power of the underground, unfiltered." As the city lights flickered through the loft's windows, Jax felt resolve solidify. He knew that staying true to his art meant risking some of these offers, but the alternative would be to betray the echo that had carried him this far. With a firm nod, he gathered the contracts and resolved to convene an underground rehearsal on his terms, inviting only those willing to amplify, rather than sanitize, the sound that had turned laughter into thunder. Sprosit ChatGPT. That Saturday evening, Jax led his small crew down a graffiti-lined alley in the Lower East Side to a decommissioned textile warehouse he'd secured for a one-night rehearsal. Inside, Long rows of dusty looms and empty shipping crates formed a cathedral of concrete pillars and exposed trusses, the only light coming from work lamps hanging on extension cords. Jax flipped a breaker in a rusted fuse box and watched as his portable PA system, two 8-inch speakers on stands, a 4-channel mixer, and a bass bin roared to life. He plugged in his Stratocaster, its patched-up strap slipping on his shoulder, and hit the first power chord of the new arrangement. A gritty E minor riff with a swung blues groove. Rico, the beatboxer, crouched beside a wooden pallet repurposed as a kick drum, his hands slapping tight 12-inch claps and syncopated snares on the pallet's worn surface. Marlene stationed herself on a welded steel platform, saxophone gleaming under the yellow lamps, looping a mournful 3-note phrase that echoed off the corrugated walls. Jax played through the intro once, then raised his hand. "Okay, let's tighten the bridge," he said, voice echoing in the cavernous space. He cued Rico's headphone feed through the mixer's solo channel so they could isolate the beat. Rico rapped along. They laughed from the curb, but this echo's gonna surge. Marlene nodded, eyes closed, layering harmonics, a counter-melody that wove between Jax's chord changes. As the trio ran the verse-chorus-verse structure 4 times, Jax adjusted the mixer's high-mid EQ on his guitar channel, sculpting out clashing frequencies so his vocals would cut through. He moved to the bass bin's edge and tapped the mixer's reverb knob, dialing in a hint of room shine to give his raspy voice a cavernous weight. At 8:45 p.m., he paused and beckoned in their guests. 2 representatives from the Midnight Jam, a festival booker from Summerwave, and the A&R director from Stone and Sound, each warned only with a text that read, "Private Showcase. Origin Story Live." They filed into the warehouse's far corner beneath a string of bare bulbs, faces half-lit and expectant. Jax cleared his throat and introduced the set. "This is the song that turned laughter into roar." He counted in on a muted downbeat and launched into the first full run. Fast, tight, every note hammered with intent. Rico's rhythms rattled the concrete floor. Marlene's sax soared over Rico's tom-like thumps. Jax's vocals, raw and unfiltered, filled every crack in the masonry. "They laughed, but I'm the echo they can't ignore. Now I'm rollin' thunder down your closed door." Midway through the second chorus, he hit the drop. A 2-bar breakdown where he and Rico traded call and response phrases, sax punctuating the gaps. The festival booker rubbed his chin. The A&R director scribbled in a small notebook. The late-night producer leaned forward, nodding his head to the groove. When the final horn stab rang out, the warehouse reverberated in silence for a heartbeat, then broke into applause that echoed like distant thunder. Jax grinned, adrenaline pumping. He swept a hand across his heart. "That's how we do it," he said quietly, eyes meeting each visitor in turn. Rico and Marlene exchanged triumphant high fives. After the set, the visitors approached. The festival booker offered to upgrade Jax's Summerwave slot to a primetime headliner, contingent on keeping this raw arrangement intact. The TV producer extended a revised contract. No exclusivity, full creative control on your own terms. The A&R director proposed a single-song development deal for a professional remix, but only if we leave the bridge exactly as is. Amid the faint hum of the deactivated PA, Jax and his crew exchanged relieved smiles. They had done more than impress industry insiders. They had shown that the power of their echo lay in its unvarnished authenticity. As the visitors departed into the night, Jax unplugged his guitar and swept the warehouse floor, pockets lined with new business cards and a renewed conviction. The garden stage would hear the same grit that turned a derided street corner set into an unstoppable echo. When the day of the Madison Square Garden concert arrived, Jax Harris stared up at the arena's iconic marquee from the loading dock, its neon letters spelling out, "Echoes Unbound Live." Backstage, the cavernous corridors smelled of fresh paint and stage smoke. Jax's heart thundered as he watched roadies wheel in his graffiti-spattered amp and the custom pallet drum platform. Sound check and stage setup. At $3 p.m., Jax stepped onto the stage, its polished wooden floor ringside, flanked by 3 massive LED screens. He plugged his Stratocaster into the amp and struck a single note. The foam-lined monitors boomed his riff back at him with cavernous depth. Rico set his foot on the pallet, slapping a syncopated rhythm that rattled the I-beam supports overhead. And Marlene raised her sax, coaxing a rich, reverb-soaked tone through the PA. The head sound engineer, Sarah Switch Nguyen, ran through a checklist on her tablet. Guitar EQ at +3 mids, drum mic levels at 6 dB, sax track at 3 dB. Vocal mic with a modest 20 ms delay to fill the arena's 1.2-second reverb tail. Costume and mindset. In his dressing room, illuminated by a row of Hollywood vanity bulbs, Jax donned his stage outfit. A distressed leather jacket adorned with his Echoes Unbound patch, dark denim with subtle paint splatters, and high-top sneakers. Scuffed by 100 street performances, he tapped the record button on his phone's backstage feed app. Fans were already tuning in for the pre-show. He breathed deeply, visualizing the scraped-back warehouse and the echo that had grown into a roar. Opening moments at 8:50 p.m., house lights dimmed. A single spotlight traced Jax's silhouette center stage. Rico began with a solo palette beat, soft echo in the cavernous arena, and Marlene's sax wove a haunting prelude on the screen's backdrop. A slow, blue-tinted pulse. Jax's voice emerged without warning. "They laughed at my crescendo!" The arena erupted, thousands of voices finishing the line. "But the echo's where I stand!" Full band explosion. On the first chorus, Jax's bandmates surged in. Rico's palms strike. Snares cut like a whip. Marlene's sax soared, and Jax's guitar soared with overdriven bends. The LED screens flared neon wings that matched Marlene's graffiti design from the warehouse. The energy was electric. Every floorboard trembled. Interactive moment mid-set, Jax challenged the audience. "When I say, 'they laughed,' you say, 'roar back.'" The chant echoed, call and response filling every seat. A fan-shot camera feed splashed across the screens, showing faces lit with excitement. Jax soloed over the crowd noise, weaving bluesy licks that danced around their shouts. Climactic finale. For the final drop, Jax cued Rico's beatbox breakdown, pared down kick and clap, while Marlene held a sustained, breathy note that pulsed like a siren. Jax lay on the floor, fingers sliding across the fretboard in a feral vibrato as the full band built tension. At the apex, they all slammed into the chorus's thunderous riff together. Amplifiers at full tilt, drums booming, sax shrieking. Confetti cannons detonated in a cascade of fluorescent ribbons. Standing ovation. As the last note faded, the arena shook with applause. A 15,000-strong standing ovation that echoed long after Jax's battered guitar fell silent. Backstage, industry scouts and fellow artists crowded around, eyes alight with awe. In that moment, Jax knew the echo had become a roar powerful enough to fill any arena. Proof that authenticity, born on a street corner jeer, could command even the grandest stage. In the days following his triumphant Madison Square Garden debut, Jax Harris found himself at the center of a cultural seismic shift, and he made sure to use his momentum to lift others. A new nonprofit, Echoes Out Loud. Within a week, Jax incorporated Echoes Out Loud, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to supporting street performers and underserved musicians. He drafted bylaws with Rico and Marlene, structuring the organization to offer performance grants, $5,000 stipends to buskers selected through an open application process, enabling them to purchase equipment, arrange professional recordings, or fund. Travel to major music hubs, mentorship programs, pairing emerging artists with established musicians, an accordionist, a jazz pianist, and a recording engineer, who provide free workshops on songwriting, stage presence, and self-production. Community showcases, quarterly, Echoes sessions in reclaimed urban spaces, empty warehouses, park amphitheaters, and subway mezzanines, where grant recipients debut new work before live audiences and industry guests. Launching the first grant cycle. Jax announced the first grants during an Instagram live Q&A. Over 10,000 viewers tuned in as he and his team outlined application criteria, emphasizing artistic authenticity and community engagement. Within 10 days, Echoes Out Loud received 2,500 applications from street performers worldwide. Flamenco guitarists in Barcelona, slam poets in Chicago, beatboxers in Seoul. A selection committee of artists and advocates met virtually to evaluate videos, resumes, and mission statements, ultimately awarding grants to 50 performers across 6 continents. Building the Echoes Festival simultaneously, Jax partnered with the city's Arts Council to launch the Echoes Festival, a 3-day outdoor event centered on street performance. Headlined by Jax's own band, the festival featured curated stages in Times Square Plaza, Central Park's Rumsey Playfield, and a specially fabricated Buskers Boulevard on Broadway. Echoes Out Loud subsidized performance fees and provided portable sound rigs, ensuring technical quality while preserving the intimacy of street-level shows. Personal mentorship and legacy. Throughout, Jax remained hands-on, hosting monthly backstage chats where grant recipients joined him online to discuss challenges, honing their craft, navigating contracts, and maintaining mental health under pressure. He shared lessons from his own journey: resilience in the face of laughter, the power of authentic connection, and the importance of creative ownership. Enduring impact. By the end of the year, Echoes Out Loud had dispersed $250,000 in grants, mentored over 200 artists, and the inaugural Echoes Festival drew over 100,000 attendees. Media coverage hailed Jax's initiative as a model for musician-led philanthropy, and several city arts commissions adopted similar grant programs inspired by his blueprint. Full circle moment. On the anniversary of his garden headlining show, Jax returned to the very street corner where he'd first been jeered. With his non-profit board and 20 grant recipients, he performed a free Echoes Together concert under the same neon street signs. As he played the opening chord of Echoes Unbound, the crowd erupted in cheers, proof that the ridicule that once fueled his defiance had now blossomed into a chorus of collective empowerment. In that moment, Jax understood that the echo he'd once fought to be heard had transformed into a movement echoing across the world, carrying countless voices from street corners to stadiums, united by the belief that every artist deserves their moment in the spotlight.